That's the Midlands, eventually Northern England and Northern Ireland too. Some of the bursts of rain could be on the heavy side. Quite a lot more cloud then across the south on Wednesday compared to Tuesday, and the wind starting to pick up once more. Still quite mild here, but temperatures further north also ticking up a little bit with a bit more sunshine here during Wednesday. Feeling quite pleasant, I suspect, in western Scotland. Low pressure continues to dominate. Bands of wet and windy weather swinging north this week, but coming from the south, it's always going to stay pretty mild.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
No spin, no bias, no censorship. This is Dan Wootton Tonight with me, Mark Dolan. And what a day it's been, folks. Prime Minister Liz Truss still in office but not in power, unable or unwilling to do anything. But look on, stricken, as her new Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, tears up her bold economic plan.
Prime Minister and I agreed yesterday to reverse almost all the tax measures announced in the growth plan 3 weeks ago.
Now, I've been a big backer of Trussonomics, but after seemingly throwing in the towel in the Conservative Party's darkest hour, prompting this humiliating clarification...
Well, the Prime Minister is not under a desk, as the
She's not under my desk. It's finally time for Liz Truss to hand in her resignation and let the Tories unite around a leader who can keep Keir Starmer at bay. A Labour government is coming, folks. Be afraid. Be very afraid. That is my digest, after which I'll get the opinions of my superstar panel, former MEP and father of one Boris, it's Stanley Johnson, Sunday Mirror political editor Nigel Nelson, and political commentator Belinda de Lucy. I'll get your all-important verdict too on whether replacing Truss will rescue the Tories. That's in The Clash at 9:25. Also coming up, on a day like no other in Westminster, have we just witnessed an establishment Remainer coup in one of the world's great democracies? We'll debate that at 10. Is Brexit in peril? Also at 9:50, live in the studio, political firebrand and former Tory minister Anne Widdecombe explores if the Tory wets have finally taken control. Plus, we must do everything we can to keep zero-COVID zealot Jeremy Hunt out of number 10. That's the view of broadcaster and activist Tanya Buxton, who's uncancelled at 10:45. Will today's U-turns backfire and threaten a deep recession? We'll speak to Trustonomics' biggest champion, Professor Patrick Minford. He's live at 10:20. Has the Tory soap opera made Britain a laughingstock around the world? Niall Gardner, former advisor to Margaret Thatcher, famously brought down by a Tory rebellion. Well, Niall is live at 9:40 from the United States. And with his Tory allies publicly calling for him to make a heroic return, should the party bring back Boris Johnson? Stanley, the man with the inside track and a degree of shared DNA, will give an update as the panel join me once more for the Media Buzz at 10:30. I'll also reveal how tomorrow's front pages are covering the Tory tailspin too, and I'll be crowning the first Greatest Britain and Union Jackass of the week at 10:50. So, my daily digest is coming, as is a Labour government. Be afraid. First, the headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Mark, thank you, and good evening to you. Well, as you've been hearing, the Chancellor of the Exchequer was in the Commons today warning MPs about future decisions of eye-watering difficulty, as he put it, as he detailed how he's now dropped most pledges made by Kwasi Kwarteng in the mini-budget 3 weeks ago. In an emergency statement designed to calm financial markets, Jeremy Hunt announced the plans to cap the cost of energy for 2 years would now end in April, with more targeted support for households. He also announced scrapping the planned cut of 1% to the basic income tax rate, which will now stay at 20p. Well, financial markets have since rallied following those announcements today, but the Chancellor did warn there were yet more difficult decisions ahead.
This government will take the difficult decisions necessary to ensure there is trust and confidence in our national finances. That means decisions of eye-watering difficulty. But I give the House and the public this assurance: every single one of those decisions, whether reductions in spending or increases in tax, will be shaped through core, compassionate, conservative values that will prioritise the needs of the most vulnerable.
Well, the opposition reacted with the Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves accusing the government of losing credibility following the change in plans.
On Friday, the unedifying spectacle of the Chancellor being dragged back from the IMF before he could do any more damage to our economy. So she has turned to a new Chancellor, who finished 8th out of 8 in the Tory leadership contest, winning just 18 votes from MPs. The Tories have run out of credibility, and now they are running out of Chancellors.
Well, in news away from politics today, the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, says hundreds of police officers should be sacked following a new report commissioned after the death of Sarah Everard. A review of the Met's internal misconduct system found officers were getting away with criminal behaviour owing to an anything-goes attitude. The report described some police procedures as well as racist and misogynistic. Sir Mark Rowley has said he's appalled by the findings and he has apologised to officers and members of the public who've been let down. Lastly, a Manchester United footballer was denied bail today and will spend over a month in custody. Mason Greenwood is charged with attempted rape, controlling and coercive behaviour and assault. The 21-year-old was first held in January over allegations relating to a young woman after images and videos were posted on social media. He was immediately suspended from playing or training with the Old Trafford club. That's it. You're up to date on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. You're with GB News, the People's Channel, where now it's time for Dan Wootton Tonight with Mark Dolan.
To quote King Charles, oh dear, Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, today hammered the final nails into the coffin of Liz Truss's political career. Trussonomics, a bold plan to reboot Britain into being a low-tax, high-growth economy and a global hub for investment and talent, is no more. It's gone the way of the Sinclair C5, the video cassette recorder and stonewashed jeans. Jeremy Hunt's been cast by some as the chief executive of this government to Liz Truss's chairman. Welcome to hell. Here he is today announcing yet more U-turns.
The government has today decided to make further changes to the mini-budget. Firstly, we will reverse almost all the tax measures announced in the growth plan 3 weeks ago that have not started parliamentary legislation. We will no longer be proceeding with the cuts to dividend tax rates, the reversal of off-payroll working reforms introduced in 2017 and 2021, the new VAT-free shopping scheme for non-UK visitors, or the freeze on alcohol duty rates. I've decided that the basic rate of income tax will remain at 20%, and it will do so indefinitely until economic circumstances allow for it to be cut.
Top rate tax cut gone. Corporation tax cut gone. Income tax cut gone. 2 years of energy support gone. And it's just a matter of days, if not hours, before Liz Truss is gone too. This is now damage limitation for the economy and for the country, which is why last night on this channel I called for Liz Truss to act in the national interest and go. But to be fair, she's already sacked herself with the appointment of Jeremy Hunt, a zero-COVID, lockdown-loving, eco-obsessed Remainer whose economic approach is diametrically opposed to everything she stands for. It's not if now, but when. Truss is toast. It's turning into a comedy sketch. She's a dead parrot. She is no more. She has ceased to be. She's an ex-Prime Minister. She has shuffled off this mortal coil to meet her maker, Sir Graham Brady. So, where do we go from here? Well, the country faces a simple choice. Liz Truss stays, and we definitely get Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Liz Truss goes, and we probably get Prime Minister Starmer, the latter being the lesser of two evils. Don't forget, even with a colossal lead like this, Keir Starmer is such an uncharismatic and underwhelming candidate. It's my view he will fail to achieve an overall majority in the House of Commons, with Labour most likely the biggest party in a hung parliament. So what would that mean? Well, it would be a woke, virtue-signalling Premier who can't define a woman, leading a left-wing, Britain-hating coalition from hell, propped up by votes from the SNP, which means Indy Ref 2 and the possible breakup of the union, and the Lib Dems, which means proportional representation, which is hung parliaments forever, and the support of a rump of hard-left Corbynites from his own party, who will push the country further into the red. It's in the Tory party's interest to get a new leader. That's clear. They can't win a raffle with Liz Truss, let alone an election. But it's in the national interest too. No one has successfully explained to me how a Labour government reliant on the votes of figures like John McDonnell, Diane Abbott and Richard Bergen is going to reassure the financial markets. A Labour government in the pocket of the unions, which will be obliged to hand out inflation-busting pay rises and which has promised money for everything, schools, policing, the NHS and beyond, will break the bank, not save it. The country is broke. We should be spending less money in the years ahead, not more, as I pointed out in my Daily Dispatch last week. The elephant in the room is that Britain lives beyond its means. On what planet is a high-spending Labour Party, torn apart by its own internal factions and an ongoing ideological civil war, good news for either our politics or our economy? Even today, Starmer out was trending on Twitter. You couldn't make it up. The Tories aren't exactly the Swiss Family Robinson, I'll grant you that. But do you really want this rabble in charge? The Tories must set aside their squabbles and unite around one figure whose task is not to be loved by the party, not to satisfy the intellectual needs of either libertarian Brexiteers on the right or One Nation Tory Remainers on the left. The new leader's task is to win the next election and keep Keir Starmer out of office. Beyond that, who cares? Because any number of names floating around as a possible replacement for Truss offer the Tories only the fool's gold of an ideologically perfect leader in opposition. Fat lot of use, that is. Far better to do what New Labour did in the 90s when they chose Tony Blair. Most of the Labour movement couldn't stand him, but he kept them in power for over a decade. The Tories are on life support. The right are getting their last rites. But there are some signs of life. So, some very tough medicine and a political amputation may save the patient. Right now, they haven't got a leg to stand on. What's your view? Dan at gbnews.uk, reacting to that and all of the big stories of the day, are my superstar panel. Political editor of the Sunday Mirror, Nigel Nelson, conservationist and former MEP, Stanley Johnson, and former MEP and political campaigner, Belinda Delucy. Belinda, she's got to go. I don't mean you.
No, well, thank you for now. Well, to the naked eye, she's kind of gone already, sadly. I mean, Hunt's clearly pulling all the strings. He's like a ventriloquist act with poor Liz on his knee. I think she's been treated in a ghastly way, whether you like her or not. If this is coup number 2, then I think, unfortunately, that's going to go down so badly with the voters, far more than if she stayed. The last thing we need right now is the turmoil of the process of removing her and then another leader appointed. And you know full well they're never going to go for a Suella Braverman or a Kemi Badenoch to replace her. They'll be going for a FT BBC darling who's centre Remain voting to replace Liz Truss. So either way, I think the Tories, unfortunately, are going to be hit hard. So I think keep her for now. We don't want any more poison and backstabbing in another leadership.
However, do you take my point in the digest that if she stays, we definitely get Keir Starmer in number 10 at the next election. If she goes, we probably get Keir Starmer.
So I think, well, 24 hours is a very long time in politics, as we've seen recently. We've got 2 years. Now, imagine, what if Putin gets defeated, right? Liz Truss gets credit for that.
She'd have to shoot him herself, I think.
Well, I mean, she did a lot. She's got a lot of praise for her action in Ukraine. Things can turn quickly, and you never know what's going to come up and bring Labour down in the next few months. And as long as Hunt doesn't overstep his boundaries too much, you never know. Liz may be on, I know she's on life support machine now, but she may last another few months. But right now is not the time to ditch her.
Stanley, we're going to talk about your boy at 10:30, but let's talk about the potential. Yeah, well, I know. Yeah. There's actually a good choice. Plenty of talent in that family. Let's be clear about that. But what about Liz Truss? I mean, she's got to go if the Tories have got any chance, hasn't she?
I mean, I listen to you. You're always good, Mark. I can remember way back in 2005 when we started on some TV show called The Last Word. I mean, wonderful to meet you again. I don't think I agree with everything you said there. I mean, yes, on one sense, it's the Tories are in the last chance saloon, which I suppose I should say the last chancellor saloon or something like that.
True.
But in another way, I think we're all panicking like mad. I think look at what happened today. The new Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, made a statement. I'm not a financial expert, but as I understand it, the markets rallied. They reacted. The pound went up a bit. What has happened the last 3 weeks is that basically it was the markets who forced, who forced the crisis. Yes, it was a crisis we brought on ourselves by having this unfunded, was it 45 billion or something?
Yeah.
But okay, once you deal with that, and I think the new Chancellor will deal with that, my feeling is that the markets will say, oh, well, there we go, let them go. Let them, and I think we will find 2 weeks from now that Liz Truss is still there. She will learn a few lessons, and later on today I'm going to talk about some of the lessons which I think she could learn on the environment front. But I personally think she's going to stay there, and I don't think we're going to see a change in the Tory party leadership for the foreseeable future.
So you think that she's odds-on to fight the election for the Tories?
I'm not a betting man, but I would absolutely say that.
I see. Well, Nigel Nelson, you've got the ear of many Tory MPs. They don't feel the same way.
No, they don't. And she's definitely gone. And the only question is the manner of her departure. So I think just by looking at her face in the House of Commons today, that she looked to me broken. I think we also must, have a bit of humanity there. It must be an absolutely dreadful position for her to be in, that here's somebody, she just fired her best mate. She will have absolutely no legacy whatsoever, but she hasn't been in for very long, and her only place in the history books will be the shortest serving Prime Minister in history. So it must be absolute agony for her, but I don't think there's any way she can stay. So at the moment that the party has to work out how they get rid of her and who her successor should be. And they've got to do it by trying to keep the membership out of it so there won't be another leadership election. Those are all quite difficult things to do. So tomorrow the Backbench 22 executive is formed. A couple of members went off to be ministers, so they need a new executive. On Wednesday, they could move and go in and see her and say, look, now, will you go? The most likely result of that is she would resign. The tricky bit then is they've got to work out who the next candidate is. Do you give the vote to MPs and have a couple of candidates, or do you try and unite the party under a unity candidate? One person stands, they go in.
Well, that's what happened when Mrs May was elected, wasn't it?
That's absolutely right.
It was just one candidate.
And look how that worked out. I mean, that was terrible.
Well, there was two candidates and one step down in Andrea Leadsom, who essentially conceded. She conceded the race. But the bottom line is, Belinda de Lucy, that they should just choose somebody that can challenge Keir Starmer. They don't have to like this leader. They don't even have to agree with the leader. It could be a Remainer or a Brexiteer, but somebody that can achieve power next time round. Well, that's why political parties exist, especially the Tory party.
Yeah, I agree, but we must remember that the Conservative Party has shown a clear dislike for their members and 2019 voters, and they clearly don't want to take any recommendations from people who vote for them. They want to choose their own. The Parliamentary Party at the moment is very disconnected from their voters, so whoever you think, oh, they'll take on Keir Starmer, if they're a favourite with the Parliamentary Party, they won't be a favourite with the members.
Although the membership got it wrong this time, didn't they?
Did they? But I think this is the thing.
Truss she's been Corbyn in heels.
Well, Truss's plans weren't
Corbyn in
wrong.
a frock.
Hang on a minute. Truss's plans weren't wrong. They were just badly delivered and ill-timed. People voted for Truss because of her low-tax policies, but the Conservative Party want to throw her out again because she's just not the right sort of Tory.
Folks, I think we're just jumping to conclusions. High heels or not, we are jumping to conclusions. I don't see it. I don't see it the way you see it. I think that the ship will steady. I will take some money. We'll put some money on this. I think 2 months from now we will find we still have the same Prime Minister that we have today, and everything has settled down. There have been a couple more mini U-turns, and finally, we're cruising ahead. That's how I see it. And of course, I don't have the familiarity with MPs which you have, Nigel.
The whole thing is, I can't see what the point of Liz Truss is anymore. That she's just had her entire economic policy ripped up. So the thing that she went into the campaign with, the tax cuts that would actually produce growth, Jeremy Hunt today ripped that apart. She actually has nothing to offer any longer.
Well, hold on. When we're talking growth, you see, Jeremy Hunt today has set up a small advisory committee on growth. Now, I don't want to take too technical here, but growth means something to some people and a lot of other things to other people. And there is a whole concept of growth, I know I'm going to be boring now, which actually is called sustainable growth, which actually gives you energy, renewables, and so on and so forth. It gives you food you don't have to import.
Yeah, it's like having Keir in power, having Hunt.
What I mean is, it's not the first time that Tories have learned the lesson on the run. Do you see what I mean? And I think our growth committee, I would very much like to have seen, I would like to have seen Dieter Helm nominated onto that committee, for example, who is the chairman of the Natural Capital Committee. Anyway, I put my money on the table there. I would say 2 months from now, we will still have Liz Truss as the Prime Minister, and I think that she will grow into the job.
Well, I've been very supportive, Belinda, of Trussonomics, because I think it was a failure of political and economic communication, a failure of sequencing, but not of policy.
Exactly.
And the moment they did the U-turns, we had big groups like the IMF saying that growth would be lower than anticipated next year. Well, go figure. Surprise, surprise. But the issue is, for me, the press conference on Friday. a faltering performance, and that was the point at which I checked out.
Yeah, I understand that she hasn't got the best sort of charisma in the world, and I don't blame her.
She didn't have the balls to take enough
But she
questions.
has been attacked with bullets since she got in. They were never going to let her succeed.
Why couldn't she stand there at the press conference and take a few more questions?
Well, I tell you what I would like. If she resigns, then she should resign and sell her story to every paper in the country about what went on as soon as she took power.
I'd buy that. Why should...
But no, because something has gone on and it's not right. It's not been an organic and transparent shenanigans at the moment. It's knavery.
But she should have owned it. She should have gone down fighting. Back me or sack me.
I agree, but she was beaten from day one.
Why should she have stood there in front of those people? Journalists, good people, I'm sure. But why should why should she have stood there and listen to people say, "Oh, go, aren't you ashamed of yourself, Prime Minister?" All the things which are shouted. You know, I mean...
Because that's what Prime Ministers do, and your son was quite good at that. And he was at his best when in a corner, whereas this woman in a corner has faltered.
But at least people gave Boris a chance. They didn't give Liz a chance. They hated on her from day one. I think she's been bullied and battered, and we saw a broken woman.
But on day one, she trashed the economy. I mean, so on that...
Well, hang on a minute. Goldman Sachs has said that the mini-budget actually helped growth, and now that it's been reversed, we're looking at recession. So all this mini-budget is disastrous thing was made up a lot by... I think we're held hostage by the markets at the moment, and I think that's a dangerous path as well, because there are lots of other elements to running a company.
Anybody is allowed mistakes in the first 2 or 3 weeks.
Well, not a mistake quite that size. I mean, you wouldn't say that Suez was actually a mistake you could forgive, which is on that sort of comparison.
Nigel, would you mind whipping out your crystal ball?
I'll get my crystal ball. Yep, it's in my inside pocket.
How long has she got? She's out by the end of the month, isn't she?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, she could be gone by Thursday. The Tory party has to get their ducks in a row.
Any chance that she will reflect and resign herself?
I think she would resign rather than be turfed out, kicking and screaming. Yeah. So they will go to her and say that there is no future, you really have to go. I think she will then fall on her sword.
Lots more to come from my brilliant panel. I think you'll agree. We're travelling business class tonight. But coming up, has the Tory soap opera made Britain a laughingstock? Former Thatcher aide Niall Gardner joins me to discuss that at 9:40. But first... will replacing Liz Truss rescue the Tories if it happens? Former advisor to Boris Johnson, Kulveer Ranger, political commentator Suzanne Evans and ex-Tory MP Jerry Hayes will thrash it out in the clash. But most importantly, I want to know what you think. So email dan@gbnews.uk or tweet us using the handle @gbnews. And do vote in the poll, which is up now. Just go to @gbnews on Twitter. And don't forget Anne Widdecombe live in the studio later in the hour. See you in 2.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christie. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Can the Tories end their death spiral? Anne Widdecombe live in the studio before 10. But first, this. Yes, it's time now for the clash. Labour were granted an urgent question in the House of Commons today regarding the government's emergency statement. But it wasn't the Prime Minister facing off against them in the dispatch box, prompting the leader of the opposition, Keir Starmer, to score this open political goal.
Now it's time for leaders to lead. But where is the Prime Minister? Hiding away, dodging questions, scared of her own shadow. The lady's not for turning up.
Boom. Truss's absence gave Leader of the House, Penny Mordaunt, a golden opportunity to display her own leadership credentials. And she proved much more than a match for Keir Starmer, pointing out that Labour is not the party of the people they claim to be.
I could point to his frustration of us leaving the EU and campaigning for a second referendum. I could point to his support for the Right Honourable Member for Islington North and his positions on NATO, or his arguments against us leaving lockdown or our involvement with the EU Vaccines Agency. The national interest.
Double boom. Mordaunt also claimed the PM had a, quote, genuine reason for being unable to attend, and just in case there was any doubt...
Well, the Prime Minister is not under a desk, as the...
Oh dear, and even when Truss did eventually arrive prior to the Chancellor's statement, remarkably, it was Mordaunt who answered the closing questions. So, an impressive showing from Mordaunt, who will be among the front runners to replace the Prime Minister alongside new Chancellor Jeremy Hunt, Rishi Sunak and possibly even Boris Johnson. But with the situation getting increasingly drastic, tonight I'm asking, can replacing Liz Truss rescue the Tories? Let me know your thoughts down at gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews. And whilst you're there, do please vote in our poll. I'll bring you the results shortly. But to debate this, I'm delighted to welcome three political experts. Former advisor to Boris Johnson, Culvia Ranger, political commentator Suzanne Evans, and ex-Tory MP Jerry Hayes. Suzanne, let me start with you. Do you think getting rid of Truss will save the Tories?
I'm not sure what can save them right now, to be honest, but I think having a fifth leader in 5 years is certainly not going to do any good whatsoever. I think you've got to think about the Conservative Party membership here as well. They voted for Liz Truss, but she's basically been ripped apart, not just by the financial markets and those kind of vested interests, but also by many members of her own parliamentary party. They must be absolutely furious. They voted for her because she had a low tax agenda. She wanted deregulation. She wants an emphasis on personal freedom and personal responsibility. And all those things today have been completely thrown out of the window by Jeremy Hunt, who is a de facto PM. And Liz Truss is almost in a hostage situation, it seems to me, at the moment. Members must be furious. And the Conservative Party relies on those grassroots members come election time to deliver leaflets, to canvass, to get out the vote. I think some of them who voted for Liz Truss are probably on the verge of ripping up their membership cards tonight and posting them back to Tory HQ. So is the party really going to be able to win a general election without that grassroots support? Now, the only way I can see in which they are going to say yes to that question is if the Labour Party becomes so utterly unelectable. But right now, I don't see that. The policies that we have at the moment, economic policies in particular, are precisely those that the Labour Party would espouse. There's not much difference between the two parties. We have the status quo once again. Both parties now want to see the tax burden kept at the 70-year high. Who's to pick between them?
Coolvia Ranger thinks things couldn't possibly be worse than they currently are. She's got to go.
Well, I think the question here is it about time that the Conservative Party puts the needs of the country first rather than the party? The issue we have here is that Liz Truss has burnt her political capital, what small amount of political capital that she had coming into number 10 in short time. And it's been a bonfire, really, because she's a mistake. She's presented it badly. She hasn't taken the party with her. And the public and everyone can see that. So to rescue the situation, really, she does feel like a lame duck Prime Minister at the moment and a lame duck leader. But I think the party will look to buttress Liz Truss because, as was being said, nobody really wants a general election right now. And changing the party leader for the Conservative Party wouldn't probably necessitate them setting out a timetable for a general election. And that's not going to happen this side of Christmas. And it's probably, if it is going to happen, would be early spring. So Truss gets to be held up in place by people around her, and like Jeremy Hunt, because actually the Conservative Party needs to put the country first. It needs to show that it can be credible, it can be calm in power, it can demonstrate that it is listening, but also providing the leadership that the public want. We've all been through the physical challenge of COVID. It feels a responsibility on politicians not to be taking the country through this whole psychodrama. So calmness, a solidity around Liz Truss. She gets held in place till either a unity candidate comes forward and can seek a timetable for a general election at some point next year.
Jerry Hayes, if the Tories don't think that Liz Truss is the leader to fight the next election, she's got to go in a timely manner. They can't stretch this one out, can they?
No. It won't be over until, I suppose, Therese Coffey sings. At the end of the day... Oh, thank you very much.
Naughty boy.
Nigel Nelson, old friend, wise old bird, got it absolutely right. What is the point of Liz Truss? Trussonomics has been buried. It's been given a funeral, and there's 6 foot of concrete over the top. So what is the benefit of the Conservative Party? It's about power. It's about keeping the centre of power. And these people are not stupid. Liz Truss was an experiment. It didn't work. She's got to go. I suspect she will be gone probably before Prime Minister's question time. She can't communicate. She learns little messages, delivery, putting the country first. All sorts of weird stuff, which means nothing to people. People are rather terrified about their mortgages. They're terrified about their jobs. And they need the old-fashioned, decent, compassionate Conservative Party who really cares about ordinary people. And they haven't got that at the moment. And if they don't get it, if they don't get a unified leader or leader who can unify the party, the Tory party will be over. It will just disappear into little fractions, and you'll get the likes of UKIP, you'll get the likes of Jeremy Corbyn, and then we've got a disaster on our hands.
As with Tony Blair for the Labour Party, potentially Keir Starmer in the Labour Party, I think the Tories have got to choose someone they don't particularly like, but who can deliver power. Jerry?
Yes, I entirely agree. I think Jeremy Hunt has done incredibly well. He's actually calmed the markets down. Suddenly, a grown-up has appeared on the front bench. And dear old Liz just looked totally tranquilised and traumatised. Of course, she just had a visit from the man with the bottle of whiskey and the pearl-handled revolver. That's why. She'll be gone soon. Look, fact is, do you want a Labour government? We can all argue about left, right, Brexit, non-Brexit, Remainers. Do you want a Labour government? If you do, keep Liz Truss. If you don't, get someone like Jeremy Hunt, maybe Rishi Sunak, maybe somebody else. But there's got to be competence and honesty and decency. And that's been sadly lacking.
Good luck that. I wouldn't hold my breath if I were you, Jerry. The clock's against us. Suzanne Evans, assuming that Liz Truss does go, who's next, do you think?
Well, that's the problem, isn't it? There isn't really a unity candidate that's going to kind of unite the faction for Liz Truss and the faction that was for Rishi Sunak. That person simply doesn't exist. I think Penny Mordaunt was arguably auditioning for the role today. I think Jeremy Hunt is probably doing the same thing. I personally wouldn't want to be voting for Jeremy Hunt as Prime Minister. He was one of the most vociferous lockdown fanatics. He never questioned fiscal responsibility when we were splurging hundreds of billions on the furlough scheme. He was one of the main agitators for keeping schools shut throughout COVID. I think his record on that's utterly appalling, really, and arguably he's one of the people responsible for this mess that Liz Truss was doing her best to sort out. And I find it quite astonishing, actually, that a former Conservative MP like Jerry is saying that Trussonomics is dead, when actually that Trussonomics is basically good old-fashioned Conservative, low-tax, responsible principles.
Coolvere Ranger, I agree with Jerry Hayes. I'm not even sure Liz Truss will do Prime Minister's questions on Wednesday. If she does, it will be her last. Assuming she does go, who's next? Who gets your vote?
Well, as Suzanne was saying, it's around competency. And I think after 12 years, the challenge is that a lot of people in the Conservative Party have baggage. There are decisions that they've made. They'll be on one side of an argument or the other. That gives them factions. But I think there are still a number of talented people on the benches and in Cabinet. And a name that really strikes me always is someone like James Cleverly. There are people around the party who are vastly experienced, both with the grassroots of the party and are seen as senior figures in the party. But I think at the moment, as I say, if the party chooses to change its leader, then it will have to set out a timetable for a general election, because the public will find it very hard to stomach a party having another leader without a political mandate. And at that point, they'll have to have a battle plan for the election. Okay. But I think Boris Johnson will play a part in that battle plan as well.
Interesting. Jerry, I've only got a few seconds, but you're not having James Cleverly Prime Minister.
James Cleverly makes a nonsense of nominative determination.
And on that classical note, listen, Jerry, I know you're not a fan, but it's been a fascinating conversation. My thanks to former advisor to Boris Johnson, Coolvere Ranger, political commentator Suzanne Evans, and ex-Tory MP Jerry Hayes. So what do you think? Can replacing Liz Truss rescue the Tories? Ali on Twitter says, of course she can't. Not now. The Tories are done. They've lost too many votes and too many supporters. Time for a new centre-right party with Boris at the helm. Was he right-wing? Nick on Twitter says, no, Labour are going to win the next election. It's better to go now and let Labour have the headache of fixing the mess rather than stay and make an even bigger pig's ear of things. Tom on Twitter says, no chance, it's over for the Tories. They can keep replacing their leaders until the cows come home. Labour will be in power by then anyway. And your verdict is in. Just 20% of you agree that replacing Liz Truss will help the Tories. 80% say it won't make a blind bit of difference. So coming up, have the Tory wets taken control of the party? Political firebrand Anne Widdecombe will give her analysis of the Tory turmoil, and she's live in the studio. She's at 9:50. But first, has the Tory soap opera made Britain a laughing stock globally? Niall Gardner, former advisor to Margaret Thatcher, famously brought down by a bloody Tory rebellion, gives his take next.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Tory legend Anne Widdecombe joins me live in the studio shortly. But first, Penny Mordaunt came out swinging in defence of Liz Truss and her mini-budget U-turns today as she faced down opposition MPs in place of the Prime Minister.
The decision taken by our Prime Minister would have been a very tough one, politically and personally. Yet, she has taken it. And she has done so. She has done so because it is manifestly in the national interest that she did. She did not hesitate to do so because her focus is on the well-being of every one of our citizens. It was the right thing to do, and whether you agree with it or not, it took courage to do it.
Now, Mordaunt's in-person defence of Truss came after penning a column in today's Telegraph, reaffirming her loyalty to the PM, arguing that our country needs stability, not a soap opera. Mordaunt was not alone in concern for Britain's global reputation. Earlier this morning, former Culture Secretary Nadine Dorries tweeted, "I cannot imagine there's one G7 country which thinks we're worthy of a place at the table. The removal of one electorally successful PM, the disgraceful plotting to remove another by those who didn't get their way first time round, is destabilising our economy and our reputation." And their fears seem founded after US President Joe Biden delivered this extraordinary rebuke of the PM's now axed mini-budget.
I wasn't the only one that thought it was a mistake. But I think that the idea of cutting taxes on the super wealthy at a time when, anyway, I just think, I disagree with the policy, but that's up to Great Britain to make that judgment, not me.
Just keep eating the ice cream, Joe. He's a tutti fruitcake. Well, to give his take, I'm delighted to welcome live from Washington in the United States, former advisor and aide to Margaret Thatcher and foreign policy analyst. It's Niall Gardner. Hi, Niall.
Hi there, Mark. Great to see you. Thanks for having me.
Great to see you. Is Britain getting a reputational kicking around the world as a result of this political drama?
Well, I have to say, Mark, that this de facto coup plot that is taking place at the moment in Westminster is very unhelpful, I think, for Britain's image in the world. And it's creating, I think, a great deal of instability in the UK. It's damaging, I think, Britain's ability to lead on the world stage, especially in terms of confronting the Russian threat over Ukraine. I mean, there are serious global matters to deal with here. And you have the coup plotters, of course, trying to bring down the Prime Minister. Now, having said all that, I think the attacks on Liz Truss by Joe Biden are absolutely outrageous. After all, you know, the US economy is going down in flames under Biden. You have the worst inflation of 40 years. You have a huge recession on the horizon. The stock market has gone down 25%, the S&P 500, this year under the Biden presidency. So for Biden to be offering economic advice to the British Prime Minister is absolutely ludicrous, frankly. And so I think it's ridiculous when you have, you know, the left-wing Biden presidency lecturing Britain over economic policy, actually. And Biden's track record is absolutely appalling. So he should really keep his views to himself, frankly.
Indeed, I couldn't agree with you more. The issue is that you served under Margaret Thatcher. You were an advisor to our ex-PM, and Truss is just not in any way comparable.
Well, I have to say that Liz Truss's handling of the last few days has been very disappointing. It was a huge error of judgment for the Prime Minister to perform a U-turn, initially over the top rate tax, and then secondly, over the corporation tax issue, and sacking Kwasi Kwarteng, I think, sent completely the wrong signal. And you've now put, Jeremy Hunt in power as the Chancellor of the Exchequer, and he has become the most powerful person in the United Kingdom, frankly. And Conservative activists did not vote for Jeremy Hunt to be the most powerful man in Britain. They voted for Liz Truss. But Liz Truss, I think, has in effect surrendered to the left wing of the Conservative Party, the Tory wets who are trying to force her out. The sharks are now circling in Westminster. They sense blood in the water. They're going to try and bring the PM down. I think that these U-turns have been absolutely disastrous and catastrophic for the Prime Minister. And it's an example of why you should never actually bow down at all to the left. You should never implement these kinds of U-turns. And I do think the Prime Minister has been very badly advised on these matters, and she's in a gravely weakened position as a result.
Great to have you on the show. Niall Gardner there, joining us live from Washington in the United States. Coming up, with Jeremy Hunt now described as the de facto Prime Minister, have we just witnessed an establishment Remainer coup? I'll debate that with my superstar panel at 10 o'clock. But first, have the wets drowned the Tory party? Political firebrand and former Tory government minister Anne Widdecombe joins me live in the studio. And she's not pulling her punches. Anne's next. See you in 2.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christie. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, We're
on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Now, after seeing Jeremy Hunt's installation as Chancellor and watching Penny Mordaunt play the role of PM at the dispatch box today, you'd be forgiven for forgetting Liz Truss has actually been made Prime Minister. Even Labour managed to deduce who was running the show when Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves took aim at Truss following her late arrival to the Commons earlier.
Now, the Prime Minister should have spoke to the House today. But we know that she cannot do that with a shred of credibility, given that the survival of this government now depends on smashing to smithereens everything that she stands for. And now she is attempting to reverse everything that she campaigned on. It is not just impossible, it is absurd. Yes. The Prime Minister is barely in office and she is certainly not in power.
So have the Tory wets taken over the party? Are the likes of Hunt, Mordaunt and Sunak following in the footsteps of Heseltine, Howe and Clark, the treacherous trio who ousted the most successful Tory Prime Minister of the modern era, Margaret Thatcher? One woman who was there to witness the dethroning of Thatcher in 1990 and knows a thing or two about the devious Tory wets and how to handle them is former Tory Government Minister Anne Widdecombe, who joins me live in the studio. Hello, Anne.
Hello. Right.
Anne, do the Conservatives face an existential threat?
The threat that the Conservatives face is from themselves. It is the Conservative Parliamentary Party, which is ungovernable, which panics at the drop of a hat. And it's all very well saying get rid of Liz Truss. You put in a new Prime Minister, what's going to happen when problems arise then? And the party will go into another panic, as they did with Boris and as they're now doing with Liz. And it is a problem of the Parliamentary Party. Now, the membership voted for a particular set of policies which Liz Truss tried to introduce immediately. She should have handled it differently, but those were the policies that she was elected to deliver. And she hasn't been allowed to do so. Now, you say, have the wets taken over? The answer to that is yes. I don't actually agree with your analysis about Ken Clarke, who I think served Thatcher pretty well during his time in the Cabinet. But I do agree with the comments about Heseltine and the others. Yeah, the wets have taken over. Jeremy Hunt is effectively running the country, not Liz Truss. Penny Mordaunt is standing there at the dispatch box. Neither of these people managed to come anywhere near Liz Truss in the leadership election. They don't appear to remember that.
Yes, Jeremy Hunt, one of the first out of the competition.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, this is somebody who voted Remain. Now, I don't mind somebody voting Remain, but when they, you know, then don't immediately say, OK, we lost, as Liz Truss did. Liz Truss just accepted and she went on to get all the trade deals. I mean, she can't be called ineffective when you look at that long list of trade deals that she got. But unfortunately, what neither she has nor Boris had, after Dominic Cummings at any rate, was good advice coming from number 10. Now, what we need is somebody like Bernard Ingham used to be, or if you look at Labour, Alistair Campbell. These were effective people. There is nobody effective in number 10. There is nobody saying, hang on, you can't quite do it that way. Let's do it this way. Let's consider this. There's nobody doing that. Or if there is, they're ineffectual.
Indeed. However, Liz Truss is now on borrowed time. So who's next, Anne?
I do sincerely hope that the party can be persuaded to stick with Liz, because I don't actually see a new leader solving the problem. And as I say, all that needs to happen is you need another set of problems and the party will go into another panic. So, you know, just changing the leader every time there's a problem isn't actually the answer.
But Liz Truss seems to have buckled under the pressure almost immediately.
She has.
So I just wonder whether this is a failure not of policy but of character.
I think she certainly buckled far too easily with reversing her policy.
And she looks a bit broken. That press conference on Friday, Anne, was a disaster, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think she is broken. I do pity her. I pity what's happened. But I think that she made two mistakes. The first was she didn't handle the announcements of the policies properly. The second was she then went into reverse far too quickly. I mean, if she'd stuck to those policies, where would we be now? And the answer is in far calmer waters than we are.
Indeed, and now, of course, you know, the financial experts are predicting a deeper recession because we're not going to have those tax cuts. In fact, a Conservative government is going to raise corporation tax as the country faces a downturn.
Yeah, discourage business, discourage enterprise. At least, thank heavens, the banker's cap hasn't been reversed. So, you know, we will be competitive with the rest of Europe on that basis. But that's all. I mean, corporation tax, you know, you want to encourage business. That's what Tories believe in. They believe in incentives. Everything which the Conservatives believe in has been stood on its head by Jeremy Hunt. That is what he has done. He has introduced a pink agenda. We have a pink party, we have a red party. There is no blue party for which to vote.
You, of course, left the Conservatives and you joined UKIP. Do you think
No, I joined the Brexit Party.
The Brexit Party, forgive me. Do you think that Britain needs a new centre-right party?
I'm afraid history tells us that new parties in this country do not survive. If you think back to the 80s and you think back to the SDP, now they had very, very senior people. They weren't just some sort of rump party. They had the Foreign Secretary, the Chancellor, you know, they had big, big people, and they won by-elections, and everybody said, here's a sea change in British politics. But when it comes to a general election, people are terrified of letting in the people they don't want. And therefore, they go back to the two-party system. And that is what happened. And the SDP didn't survive. And yes, I would love to see a centre-right party. I really would. I would like to see a party with a truly conservative agenda. I would love to see that. But I don't believe that it's possible in the electoral system that we have.
And we haven't really had a truly conservative party for many years, have we? I mean, look at the reaction to the pandemic. The reaction was not a conservative reaction, which would have been the Sweden approach, inform the public of the risk of COVID, but protect the economy and allow businesses to continue trading, don't harm the future prospects of children by closing schools. But instead, we adopted effectively the sort of Chinese Communist Party policy of lockdown under a Conservative Prime Minister. So this problem has been a long time in the making, and it seems to be a cultural issue within the Tory party.
We've had it since Cameron, basically. Until that, I think we did have significant differences. But Cameron was effectively the heir to Blair. The heir to Blair. And
he admired Blair and it showed.
And he admired Blair and it showed.
Yes, indeed. So do you think the Tories need a stint out of power in order to regroup and come to their senses, Anne?
That would be fine, but for the inevitable consequence that if the Tories have a stint out of power, Labour has a stint in power. And that will be very destructive for the country. And I cannot wish a socialist government on this country. And so, therefore, I am not going to say that the Tories should have a stint out of power. What I'm going to say now is what I've said before, and I do hope eventually somebody listens. There is one tool that can actually govern that crazy parliamentary party, and that is the fear of being deselected. Right. And every single constituency chairman in the country, if any of you are listening, every single one should now summon in their MPs and say, unless you are utterly loyal to the leadership for the duration of this Parliament, your selection is not going to be automatic. That is what they need to be saying. They have the power. I mean, the government's no longer got the power. The Conservative Party in the country has that power. Use it, guys.
So you can't wholeheartedly endorse Liz Truss, but you would say she must stay?
I believe for stability's sake, and because I don't believe that a new leader is going to solve the problem, because, you know, we had one new leader after Boris. That hasn't solved the problem. We actually need to rediscover nerve in the parliamentary party, and for heaven's sake, to get a better quality. I know this can't be done overnight. Get a better quality of MP in there. Get some older, wiser, steadier hands on the tiller.
Bring back Anne Widdecombe. Anne, a thrill to meet you in the flesh. An absolute legend of politics, a fabulous political commentator and, of course, former Tory party minister and ex-Brexit party member as well. Lots more to come. It's the turn of the hour and, well, let me tell you what's going to happen. It's 10 o'clock. This is Dan Wootton Tonight with me, Mark Dolan. And after watching on in silence as her premiership collapses around her, Prime Minister Liz Truss has finally broken cover. She'll be speaking next, after which I'll get the reaction of my superstar panel, Stanley Johnson, Nigel Nelson and Belinda DeLucy. Plus, Trussonomics champion Patrick Minford analyses whether today's U-turn will inevitably now lead to a deep recession. Tanya Buxton asks if the future of the country relies on stopping Jeremy Hunt. And will Boris be back? Stanley, his father, gives the inside track. But first, the news headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Thank you very much, Mark. And the latest news headlines. Well, Liz Truss, the Prime Minister, has been giving her first interview following a series of recent political missteps. The Prime Minister apologising for her mistakes. In just 6 weeks, the Prime Minister's economic policies caused the British pound to plunge, emergency central bank intervention, U-turns and the firing of her Chancellor. Despite that, she says she's determined to deliver on the 2019 Tory manifesto.
Prime Minister, you have no direct mandate from the electorate and no political leaders come back from the kind of poll ratings that you're currently enduring. What makes you want to go on?
What I'm focused on is delivering for the British public. Now, I recognise we have made mistakes. I'm sorry for those mistakes, but I've fixed the mistakes. I've appointed a new Chancellor. We have restored economic stability and fiscal discipline. And what I now want to do is go on and deliver for the public. We were elected on the 2019 manifesto. I'm determined to deliver on that. Levelling up, securing investment into all parts of our country, getting roads built, getting opportunities right across the nation. And that's what I'm thinking about and that's what I'm focused on.
Your colleague Charles Walker has said you've got a maximum of 2 weeks before you're removed from office. What would be your message to him and others on your own benches who are saying things like that?
My message is we should be focusing on delivering for the British public. We are in difficult economic times. We're in difficult international times with the war being perpetrated in Ukraine. And now is the time to focus on delivering, making sure that we are delivering on our energy package. So before we stepped in, people were facing energy bills of up to £6,000. We've now put in place the energy price guarantee. We've reversed the national insurance increase. And that's what I'm thinking about as Prime Minister.
Well, that was Liz Truss in her first interview since the furore earlier on today, and that interview coming after the new Chancellor warned MPs in the Commons today about the decisions of eye-watering difficulty, as he put it, that we still have ahead. Jeremy Hunt abandoned most of Kwasi Kwarteng's mini-budget plan set out 3 weeks ago. Now he says the plans to cap the cost of energy for 2 years will end in April, with more targeted support for households. Also scrapped the planned cut of 1 pence to the basic income tax rate, which will now stay at 20 pence. Well, the pound and financial markets did rally following what he had to say. Now, the Queen Consort and her sister are having a night out together at the Booker Prize Awards ceremony this evening. Camilla arrived at the Roundhouse in London with Annabelle Elliott. She's expected to present the winner with their prize later in what is the first fully in-person Booker Prize Awards since the ceremony in 2019. You're up to date on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. You're with GB News. Back now to Mark Dolan.
My thanks to Polly Middlehurst, who returns in an hour's time. Tomorrow's news tonight now in our Media Buzz. Let's kick off with a first look at tomorrow's front pages, and we begin with Metro. And they lead with the following: the Axeman cometh. Liz Truss watched on in silence as new Chancellor Jeremy Hunt told MPs he had shredded her Trussonomics strategy of tax breaks and warned the country to brace itself for big spending cuts instead. The Independent: pensions at risk in Hunt's search for more savings. The future of the triple lock protection for state pensions has been thrown into doubt after Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, refused to commit to keeping it earlier today. Pensioners' charities voiced alarm over his words, which stand in contrast to previous promises from Liz Truss and Mr Hunt's predecessor, Kwasi Kwarteng. I'll get to more of the papers very, very shortly as they come in, but reacting to tomorrow's front pages and the big stories of the day are political editor of the Sunday Mirror, Nigel Nelson, conservationist and former MEP Stanley Johnson, and another former MEP and political campaigner Belinda DeLucy. And breaking tonight, as you've just heard, Liz Truss has apologised for mistakes made in the mini-budget 2 weeks ago. Until now, the deafening silence from the PM had compounded the theory that she's fallen victim to a government coup, something that her once leadership rival Penny Mordaunt was forced to deny while standing in for her in the House of Commons earlier today.
We know that the Prime Minister is now not in power. We know that there has been a coup.
I know it is not usually in the nature of the honourable gentleman to overly dramatise a situation. But I don't think there has been a coup.
But soon after that, new Chancellor and establishment favourite Jeremy Hunt was delivering his statement to the House and tearing Truss's economic plan to shreds, even hinting at the introduction of an energy windfall tax, despite the PM saying she would never go there.
Let me tell the right honourable gentleman, I am not against the principle of taxing profits that are genuine windfalls, but as he will know very well in the energy industry, it is a very cyclical industry, and there are businesses that have periods of feast and famine, and you have to be very careful that you don't tax companies in a way that drives away investment. So we have said that nothing is off the table.
Meanwhile, Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves readily claimed Hunt has no authority or mandate to announce these new policies.
So she has turned to a new Chancellor who finished 8th out of 8 in the Tory leadership contest, winning just 18 votes from MPs. The Tories have run out of credibility and now they are running out of chancellors. The truth is, had he won the contest and implemented these policies, we would be in an even worse place than we are now. There is no mandate, there is no authority for any of this.
Many Conservatives will also be concerned that Hunt, a centrist and notorious Remainer, could be holding all the power, especially after another mooted and more preferable replacement for Truss in the eyes of the party right. Ben Wallace tonight told The Times he wanted to remain Defence Secretary. So with Hunt possibly acting as the de facto PM, have we just witnessed a political coup led by the Remain establishment? Or will Liz Truss's apology tonight and vow to deliver for the British public save her skin? Well, Belinda, you are a red-blooded Brexiteer.
I am.
If we cut you in half, it would say leave in the middle.
It would have a beautiful butterfly and a Union Jack going, set me free, set me free.
Pleased to hear that.
Yes, I am. This, to me, it looks like a coup. It smells like a coup. I mean, I'm sorry, but the behaviour of the Conservative Party since 2016 has been total infighting, trying to overturn votes.
All parties fight.
Hang on, this is overturning a democratic vote. I don't think the Tories have done that before. And remember, the Tory machine was certainly majority Remain at the time. And it's the same infighting we're seeing now. You know, the British people, millions of us, spent 3 years re-educating the political class on losers' consent. Right? 3 years, because they'd forgotten. And so now we're seeing the penny hasn't dropped, clearly. And when you don't win, you still get the chance of power because the people don't know what they're voting for, and people like Hunt know what's best. And I see it as a coup because Hunt, remember, he failed 2 leadership contests. As mentioned before, he got only 18 votes in the last one against Truss. He's now de facto PM. He's not just the Chancellor. He has the power. He's pulling the strings. And who put him there? Why is it not transparent? That's what we need to know. The people, the members don't get a vote. The electorate have had Boris taken away from them. Brexit now in peril. You know, what is the point in voting Conservative anymore if the parliamentary party keep going against everyone we vote for? So, yes, I do think it's a coup, but not just a Remainer coup. It's a centrist, globalist kneeling, Tory wet coup, and I think no, I'm sorry, I know, Stanley, you're shaking your head, but the behaviour of the Conservative Party for the last 6 years has not demonstrated to me to trust that the appointment of Hunt is anything except
big states, high tax, low growth.
I mean, that's nothing to do with the Tory, but the Conservative Party is exactly the opposite. You know, as I said before, Hunt is the darling to all the people who are against Britain self-governing itself. So...
The Conservatives are not Conservative anymore, Stanley.
Well, I think it's most extraordinary, Belinda, that you're fighting this Brexit battle all over again. You know, you're accusing the Remainers of trying to grab onto power to reverse history. I mean, I was an MEP, you were an MEP. I think I was an MEP about 25 times longer than you were, because you were only there for 6 months. Anyway, I think it's very, very bizarre that you're dragging all this in and putting this as a Remainer, a Brexiteer operation. No, it's not. The message here is actually the Tory party government, the Conservative Party government, did deliver, and you suggest they didn't. Did deliver some really good things. It delivered COVID, for example. It got us out of COVID. It led the way in Ukraine. I'm going to come to my hobby horse. It really did set an environmental agenda, which was extremely important. Where are we now? OK, there's been a little bit of a hiccup over the last 2 weeks, but the ship has been steadied. And what we need to do is to focus on the 2019 manifesto, which nobody can say did not have the endorsement of the British people. That's what my advice, as far as anybody could listen, would be to Jeremy Hunt and the others. Just remember where we came from, folks, which was the 2019 manifesto. That's what gave us the majority, including all the things I care about. Let's stick to that.
So do you think the appointment of Hunt reflects that?
I do indeed. I think it's a very, very fine appointment, and I think he has probably read, absolutely understands, and is ready to implement the 2019 manifesto, which didn't have a great deal about trustonomics in it, didn't have, if I may say so, the ludicrous proposal by Jacob Rees-Mogg to sunset all the laws we've had for the last 20 or 40 years from tear them out the statute by 2023. No, I think Mr. Hunt, Jeremy Hunt, has a sense of where the centre lies, and I think, if anything, this is a Conservative grab for the centre, and it'll work.
Well, a grab for the centre, but that means higher taxes, low growth. We might as well have Labour.
Well, why not? I mean, I would actually support that
What's
anyway.
the difference?
On the basis that obviously I want a general election. I take exception with Belinda saying that all this was actually democratic. I mean, it was only 0.4% of the electorate.
But they still followed the rules.
And we don't have a presidential system. It was the Conservatives who won 5 years in power.
Yeah, I'm not sure you can keep doing it, though. You might be able to get away with it once or twice, but to keep doing it this way probably doesn't work. But, I mean, yes, you could have a Labour government. That would suit me down to the ground. Some of the policies that Jeremy Hunt is adopting, particularly on the energy prices, it's what Labour put up. Labour said it shouldn't go on for longer than 6 months till we see how the whole thing goes.
Labour then said, oh, we'll do 2 years. Have they got to row back on that?
No, I mean, Labour stuck to the original policy was to do it for 6 months. So Liz Truss came in and wanted to do the whole thing for 2 years. The issue will obviously be, what do you do at the end of that 6 months, and how does Jeremy Hunt, assuming he is either Prime Minister or Chancellor then, how does he then target it at the people in need? That's the key sort of message that's got to come across. You could do it by making sure people on benefits get the lion's share of it. You might do it for big families who will use a lot of energy by doing it on child benefits, something like that.
Well, and you might also have a situation where the price of energy has come dramatically down.
Indeed.
And I think this is what we're aiming.
It may not be needed into the spring, and here's hoping it isn't. But are you seriously telling me, Nigel Nelson, that the markets will be settled at the idea of having a Labour government in the pockets of the unions giving pay rises to their public sector chums? I mean, Labour governments always spend more than Conservative governments. How is that good news for the economy?
Well, I'm not sure that thesis is absolutely right.
Keir Starmer's giving everyone a pay rise, isn't he?
Well, who's he giving a pay rise to?
Well, nurses, for a start, doctors, the judiciary. To almost every industry that he's been quoted on, he said, oh, we're going to pay people properly. Well, he calls it investment, but it's not. It's borrowed billions, isn't it?
No, but if you're talking about fair pay, I think that's quite a reasonable thing to actually
Sure, but it costs money and the country's broke.
It does cost money, but Keir Starmer is kept out of the current disputes, which I think is quite right for a Prime Minister in waiting. And when it comes to fair pay, is it fair, for instance, that last year the top bosses awarded themselves 109 times more than their average worker? From the previous year, it was 79 times, and it shows where the pay is actually
So
going.
will a Labour government punish success? Is that the plan?
Not a question of punishing success. I mean, I think that what you do is you work with the city. The idea that the markets are actually dictating government policy.
Well, they are at the moment.
No, they're not. Well, what the markets are doing, all the free market does is want to protect its own riches and get richer. Anything that threatens that, and the mini-budget did, then they react to, and that's what the markets are doing. What Liz Truss should have done, and what incidentally John McDonnell would have done, is try and take the markets with you by going into the city, talking to people, saying, this is what we plan to do, you make your plans to actually do.
And what Labour plans to do is spend more money. pay rises in the public sector, more investment in education, the NHS. The country's bare, the cupboard's bare. This is the worst possible time for a Labour government. I actually said on last night's show that Labour have done great things in times of plenty. But at the moment, the worst thing that can happen is a big spending, left-leaning administration.
I think a litmus test is going to be whether Jeremy Hunt actually manages to avoid maintaining the triple lock. Do you see what I mean? Because that is something I'm pretty sure we cannot afford. And whom does it benefit? It benefits basically the middle classes and so on and so forth.
Tory voters, of course.
And the Tory voters. So I think it would be quite a test if he says, look, we do need to save money and the triple lock has to go.
In defence of Jeremy Hunt, his U-turns today have pleased the markets. The cost of government borrowing is now lower, and the pound has sort of gone up a little bit, recovered slightly.
Great, that was bound to happen. And again, only slightly. And the pound was recovering anyway. It shot back up only a few days after the mini budget, not to the highest heights, but it was certainly on its way back up. And I'm sorry, I know, Stanley, you said, Hunt's taking a grab for the centre, but the centre has moved massively to the left. So when you say he's grabbed the centre, you're talking about open borders, supranational governance, all this political identity stuff and woke business. That's where Hunt and his sort of rishi machine
lockdowns
are going.
and the eco agenda.
And the eco agenda.
I would have worn that badge proudly. that green eco agenda thing. I thought that's fine. Well, I think we are going to find that the economics and the environmental stuff march hand in hand, and I know I don't want to quote Boris too much, but I will tell you that one of his more memorable phrases was that this country has wind coming out of his ears, if you see what I mean, and we will certainly manage to move much more towards the direction of self-sufficiency in energy if we do some things. Now, you may say, Mr. Starmer, Sir Starmer, I should say, I think.
Sir Keir, correct.
Yes. Sir Keir, yes, exactly, Sir Keir. He cares about this.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, his plan for growth involves
nice line.
It involves renewables and actually getting that industry working.
Well, good for him. Good for him. I said that.
Cost implementing net zero before 2030.
Well,
we can't afford not to.
The initial investment is $8 billion.
Which is nothing.
Yes, indeed.
$8 billion is the extra money we've been spending because of the rise in cost of borrowing as a result of...
That's right.
Now's not the time for all that business.
That today.
That's right, of course. Labour have been talking about a 1970s-style state-run energy company pumping taxpayers' billions into flaky renewables. Good luck with that. We'll discuss more of that very shortly. Stanley's not happy. Coming up, with his biggest allies in Westminster publicly calling for his return, could Boris be back? Stanley, his dad, gives the inside track when the superstar panel return for our media buzz at 10:30. I'll also be asking Belinda, Nigel and Stanley whether Boris was really a true Conservative. What's your view? Dan at gbnews.uk. But first, he's been the biggest backer of Trust-onomics. How does top economist Professor Patrick Minford feel seeing the government rip the plan apart? And will today's U-turn inevitably lead to a deep recession? He's next.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Now, Trussonomics, as it's known, was dealt a hammer blow today as the newly appointed Chancellor Jeremy Hunt ripped up the Prime Minister's economic plan introduced less than a month ago. Whilst the decision seems to have steadied the markets for now, backers of Truss's economic vision, like my next guest, Professor Patrick Minford, have warned that this U-turn will cause a fiscal implosion. Patrick, who was Margaret Thatcher's former economic advisor, has never faltered in his support of Trussonomics, even when others were sceptical.
High tax cuts will decrease inflation.
Really?
Because what they
Can
do...
you point to a single chancellor, a single governor of the Bank of England, single leading economist who thinks that cutting taxes with borrowed money does anything other than increase inflation?
Patrick Minford, who's written an article about it this weekend.
And Patrick Minford joins me now. Professor, welcome to the programme.
Good evening, Mark.
Professor Mitford, you and I discussed on this programme the merits of rebooting Britain, reinventing Britain as a low-tax, high-growth, high-investment country. The policy seemed right. What went wrong?
Well, I think that you've got to remember there was huge opposition to it, both outside the government and, of course, inside the government from the Treasury and the Bank of England. And so I think that it was very badly implemented. And the Treasury, when you look at the budget documents, there weren't any at all. And so Kwasi Kwarteng was sent out to a very hostile audience around the UK, led by organs of opinion like the FT and The Economist, and then you've got the Institute of Fiscal Studies and Citibank, all kind of rooting against these policies. And he had no documentation to back him up at all. And I think the Treasury must have known this because, of course, Kwasi Kwarteng was worried about the Office of Budget Responsibility being very hostile to the whole set of policies, which it was. And so he didn't use them, but the Treasury should really have come in behind him and produced documentation in its place by, updating the old OBR projections and so forth. And we did projections which showed that actually, if you assumed that the economy didn't go into recession and that there was some return to sort of normal growth of the last 30 years, the finances would have been perfectly sound and, the debt ratio would come down steadily. And the Treasury just didn't bother to do any documentation to back that up. And then you got the Bank of England refusing really to support the gilt-edged market at the end of last week. And that was a hammer blow, I think, to the whole set of policies. And, it could, with the Bank of England not cooperating either, again, because it totally opposed all these policies, obviously it's supposed to be on side, but how do you get these institutions to cooperate when they really don't want to? And of course, they just basically sat on their hands. So it really meant that it was very hard to persuade the markets that this was all viable. And with the bank refusing to kind of stabilize the gilt-edged markets after the end of last week, this was very difficult indeed, because, of course, the Achilles heel was that as the gilt-edged rates went up, mortgage rates were going up, and this made the whole policy extremely unpopular in the country. So it became a really very difficult situation. So I think the root of it all was really failure of implementation, essentially with the civil service and the Bank of England's finger marks all over that.
Would you therefore suggest, reading between the lines, Professor Minford, that there was a conspiracy against this bold new vision for the British economy, murdered at birth?
Well, that's probably a dramatic but accurate way of putting it, because the whole establishment of elite opinion and civil service and official opinion was completely hostile to these ideas. And so they did everything they could to stop it. And now we're back to a world where taxes are going up, recession is much more likely, and ironically, that's going to worsen the finances. Whereas on the basis of, as I was saying earlier, on the basis that we kept the economy steady and growing in a normal sort of way, which these policies would have done, the finances would have been absolutely fine. But, you know, the whole of the elite establishment were kind of determined to destroy these policies. It was extraordinary watching the viciousness of the attacks on them and the lies that were told. I mean, the IFS Citibank projections were really completely absurd. They forecast a never-ending recession. And of course, that's designed to undermine the finances, because of course, if you have a never-ending recession, you don't get any revenue into the budget. So, of course, that's a way of guaranteeing you're going to have all these black holes they kept on talking about. It was all just pure nonsense, really, to be honest.
However, can all of those financial speculators be wrong, given the fact that following the U-turns, particularly today, the pound recovered its position to where it was pre-mini budget, and also the cost of government borrowing has come down as well. So the markets, they like what they see in these U-turns.
Well, that was all the arguments, always the arguments of the Treasury and the bank, that you should follow extremely conventional policies that suppressed, spending and kept taxes high, and disregard the effects of that on growth, because that at least would keep the markets calm. And that was the whole argument. And of course, that's true in the short run, that they'll keep the markets calm, because if you do these very short-run things to stop borrowing, of course, the markets have nothing to be upset about because they're not lending us anything. And so, unfortunately, those policies lead to the dead end of low growth and a stagnant economy. But, therefore, they're not viable in the long term. And in the long term, borrowing, I think, will go up because of the stagnation of the economy. That's the irony of the whole thing. These things are short-term, calming to the markets, but long-term, they're going to devastate the economy unless they're reversed. I mean, I think one just has to hope that they will be reversed at some future date if the government can get a prime minister that will, bring the government to its senses. I mean, at the moment, of course, it's all very up in the air. We don't know who is going to be the prime minister in the next few months. But if the new prime minister, whoever this may be, assuming and if it were to be Liz Truss, can get things back on course so that we don't go into this stagnant future, then there's still hope after all. But if we just condemn the economy to stagnation, this is not a future that any will be good for any of us, or indeed for the public finances, ironically.
Having failed to execute her economic vision, do you think that Liz Truss's position is untenable, Professor Minford?
Well, I'm not in the political business. I think politically, obviously, it's very difficult. But if she could survive politically, then I think there is a hope that she could revert to these policies in the longer term once the situation has calmed down. And if we look ahead a year or so, we're going to see much lower inflation. And as was said in your debate, much lower gas prices. So I don't think there'll be much need for this price support thing, which was very expensive. And also, you know, we could be looking at the economy having calmed down with lower interest rates again and the possibility of resuming growth. So if she could survive, she could then, in kind of a slower sort of way, return to these sensible policies that would boost growth. Of course, that's a big if. And if she can't survive, then one would have to hope that whoever replaced her would do the same.
Professor Patrick Minford, thank you very much for your time. Coming up, does the future of the country rely on stopping zero-COVID zealot, ecomaniac Jeremy Hunt? Broadcaster and activist Tanya Buxton is uncancelled at 10:45. But first, his Westminster allies want it, and I imagine a few of you might like to see it as well. But will Boris be back? I'll be probing the one and only Stanley Johnson and revealing how more of tomorrow's newspapers cover the Truss tailspin when my superstar panel returns. The Media Buzz is next.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Let's return to tomorrow's news tonight in our Media Buzz. More front pages have been delivered, and let's have a look at The Sun. They lead with the following. The Ghost PM, sorry Liz, sits silent as Hunt rips up budget. Truss's day of despair. I've got to say, the tone of this coverage on the front page of The Sun is not very flattering, and it certainly doesn't seem to be throwing Liz Truss much of a bone. Liz Truss sat ghost-like as the new Chancellor Jeremy Hunt earlier today shredded her tax cuts and energy price freeze, but vowed last night she would not quit. But I've got to say, that is not a ringing endorsement from the Sun newspaper and does not bode well. Next up, the I newspaper. Hunt takes charge as PM fears the exit. Liz Truss has 48 hours to save her premiership, with the next flashpoint at PMQs on Wednesday. The Guardian: Hunt rips up PM's plans in astounding U-turn on tax. Liz Truss's future in doubt after a reversal of majority of her policies. Chancellor slashes energy price freeze and warns of further cuts. The Telegraph: we must take decisions of eye-watering difficulty. Jeremy Hunt will tomorrow confront the Cabinet with a demand to find new spending cuts to restore Britain's economic credibility after he ripped up Liz Truss's tax plans. Well, there you have it, folks. Austerity 2.0. Let's have a look at the Mirror now. Mini budget meltdown, humiliated. Silent PM sees her vision trashed. Tories tell her she can't go on. Also, world exclusive, Rod Stewart, my Ukrainian family. Mercy missions, say the Daily Mirror. Sir Rod pictured with the refugee family that he is currently housing. And last but not least, the Daily Star. Lettuce Liz on leaf support. Stand clear. The PM's political credibility flatlined today after her entire tax plans were killed off by a little gem of a chancellor who can actually count. Harsh words. Harsh but fair, you tell me. Those are your front pages. Let's get reaction to all of the big stories of the day with my superstar panel. Political editor of the Sunday Mirror, Nigel Nelson. Conservationist and former MEP, Stanley Johnson. Another former MEP and political campaigner, Belinda DeLucy. Now, with her premiership hanging by a thread, Liz Truss tonight broke her silence to apologise for her screeching mini-budget U-turn.
Now, I recognise we have made mistakes. I'm sorry for those mistakes, but I've fixed the mistakes. I've appointed a new Chancellor. We have restored economic stability and fiscal discipline. And what I now want to do is go on and deliver for the public. We were elected on the 2019 manifesto. I'm determined to deliver on that.
Despite fessing up, the question of who might replace her remains on everyone's lips. And the spectre of a certain former Prime Minister is looming large. It's no secret that since Boris Johnson's undemocratic ousting back in July, many Tory MPs have suffered severe buyer's remorse. And one of his most loyal supporters, former Culture Secretary Nadine Dorries, today tweeted what many others are thinking. She said there's no unity candidate, no one has enough support. Only one MP has a mandate from party members and from the public. A mandate with an 80-seat majority, Boris Johnson. The choices are simple. Back Liz, if not, bring back Boris or face a general election within weeks. It comes as a shock new poll predicts the complete annihilation of the Conservatives if a general election were held tomorrow, to the point where the SNP would become the official opposition. Terrifying. The electoral calculus poll of polls is the worst yet for the Tories, showing Labour a whopping 36 points ahead. So, should the Tory party think the unthinkable and bring back Boris Johnson? Who to ask first? Belinda? No. Go on then. It's yours, Stanley.
I have no inside knowledge on this at all, but if I might talk in the generality.
Of course you can. In the national interest, would you like to see him back?
National interest. No, I think I'm with Nadine on this one. I think that we stick to Liz Truss. If that doesn't work, we have a general election. I cannot see that there's a case for changing again a prime minister. Do you see what I'm getting at?
Well, I hear you, but actually the one loophole would be Boris Johnson, because he's the one with the 5-year mandate. He's the one with that majority.
Well, it's an interesting constitutional point there. To do with the way he was deposed. I mean, there is a case to say it was not actually a constitutional, deposition because they didn't follow the rules and so on and so forth. I go back to Boris's own image. I think he said about Cincinnatus going back to the plough. Although some people did point out that when Cincinnatus did finally return, he got assassinated.
That's right.
So we have to be a little bit careful there. I have no inside knowledge. Yes, I heard that last speech where he said, I think, hasta la vista,
yes,
baby, something
which means
like that.
I'll be back, right?
Yes, I mean, but I would say the odds are vanishingly small that Boris could be a candidate for the succession at this point. It was vanishingly small. I think Nadine.
Do you think he'd like it?
No, I have no idea. I have absolutely no idea.
Making too much money now, isn't he?
That's not the kind.
He's filling his coffers.
That's not the kind of conversation I have with him or with anybody else, for that matter. My view of life is never ask direct questions and never give direct answers. That is my general policy, and I'm going to stick to it. I think we're going to see a situation where Liz Truss, repeating myself, will stay in, and she will realise that the situation is much, much better than it seems to be. And 48 hours is a long time in politics. You said she had 48 hours to, face PMQs on Wednesday. In that 48 hours, it'll become perfectly clear that energy prices are tumbling, the government's borrowing needs are not anything like as high as they need to be. Yes, they won't have to have the triple lock on pensions. B, you could see him hinting at it already, there will be some kind of energy windfall tax. And suddenly that 46 billion debt, which we hope won't seem anything like as bad as it does.
Yeah.
Here's hoping. We borrowed 400 trillion, to deal with COVID.
400 billion, absolutely.
Billion, that's what I mean.
Belinda, obviously, Stanley is he's pleading the fifth on this one.
Yes.
But what do you think? Should they bring Boris back? Because
Stanley probably wants a peaceful Christmas family, doesn't he?
Constitutionally, it's sound for him to return because it's his mandate in the first place.
Well, let's look at it. Tories are polling at around 24% at the moment. They haven't been that low since, I think, a month before Tony Blair swept to power, except in the spring of 2019 when Theresa May had it polling at 18%. 18%. And then Boris swooped in and won the largest victory for the Tory party since Thatcher. So he was the winning gold dust.
He's an election-winning machine.
He is. However, he did disappoint a lot of voters. He had no political teeth or will to address the immigration crisis, no interest in reducing immigration, no interest in sending back failed asylum seekers. We have 60% of them, I think, are Albanians, whereas Germany and Sweden reject 100% of Albanians that turn up in their country.
Got us through COVID.
Oh, but I agree, Stanley, but so he should.
Well, you say you agree, but he gave in to the doomsday scientists of Sage.
I think he should have cut lockdown in half. But anyway, I do respect Boris for getting us through Brexit a bit and for making some good decisions, but he did let us down. And I'm sorry, but a Conservative Party that is pro-mass immigration and refuse to control our borders, which I don't think they want to. I think there's no interest.
Nigel,
on a losing streak.
Briefly, a return of Boris Johnson would have Keir Starmer sweating in his bed at night?
I don't think so. I've discussed Boris Johnson a lot on this sofa, but never actually sitting next to his dad. So if Stanley will forgive me, I don't think Boris Johnson will come back. I think he'd be too divisive a figure, because you've got all those people who wanted to get rid of him in the first place, all those ministers who quit, the party turned against him. It's certainly being talked about in the House of Commons, but it's not really a goer.
OK, well, there you go. Front page of the Daily Mail has just dropped, and it's another scathing headline. Let's have a look if we can, because, of course, the views of the Mail are of great interest to the Tory party, given that it's a relatively conservative supporting tome. In office but not in power, the paper writes that Truss has finally said sorry in a grovelling apology for blunders on the economy. I've got to say, a negative headline there on the front page of the Mail and a negative headline on the front page of the Sun, the ghost PM. It doesn't bode well. I think that Fleet Street are disowning our current Prime Minister. We'll get to more of that shortly. Coming up also, the crowning moment of the show as I name today's greatest Briton and Union jackass. But next in Uncancelled, Tanya Buxton asks if the future of the country relies on stopping Jeremy Hunt from becoming Prime Minister. Just after we take a look at what's coming up in tomorrow's show.
Coming up on Dan Wootton Tonight with me, Mark Dolan. Further reaction to the political fallout in the heart of Westminster. We'll speak to the biggest names across the political spectrum. And I'll be laying out my views at the top of the show in my daily digest. Should smaller right-wing parties like UKIP and Reform unite to offer a robust alternative to voters? We'll speak to UKIP's brand new deputy leader, Rebecca Jane. Plus, there's no holds-barred opinion from my superstar panel, reacting to the big stories of the day and tomorrow's papers. Christine Hamilton, Calvin Robinson and Rebecca Reid. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, with me, Mark Dolan. Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. on GB News.
It's time for Uncancelled, where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. Now, my next guest, the indomitable freedom fighter Tanya Buxton, was one of the brave few, like myself and a few others, who dared to fight back against this country's ruinous pandemic response. That's why it's so terrifying that the COVID authoritarian Remainer, Jeremy Hunt, who championed brutal Chinese-style lockdowns and vaccine mandates, appears to now be running the country.
Both requires confidence and stability, and the United Kingdom will always pay its way. This government will therefore take whatever tough decisions are necessary to do so.
Jeremy Hunt there. Jez we can, Jez we can't. Tanya, does the future of the country rely on stopping this zero-COVID eco-zealot, Jeremy Hunt?
It really does. I mean, we're doing this with smiles on our faces, but I'm really, really worried. Should we remind ourselves of some of the things that Jeremy thought were wonderful? He thought it was wonderful when his sister went back to China and was escorted by officials to her apartment, put into her apartment. Her door was sealed, and she periodically had police coming round to make sure she didn't go out. He thought that was brilliant. He supports this Chinese zero-COVID, dog-killing, inhumane way of being. And this is the man that is allegedly now running the country. It is so petrifying to me. It's so frightening to me that this man is near power. And we don't want him. Nobody voted him in. He was the first out of the leadership attempt. Yeah. And the worst thing is, for me, is that he is one of these elitists that wants us not to govern ourselves. He is part of the EU. He wants us to be governed by some entity over there that has nothing to do with our lives. And we don't want that. All mothers at home who had to deal with their children during lockdown and what they went through during lockdown saw what Jeremy Hunt did to them. On top of that, he was very much for the vaccine mandates. Can I just have a quick mention while I'm here, talking about the Together Declaration, which wants the people in power at the time to apologise, reinstate and compensate all of those care home workers that got sacked because of part of the policies that this man wanted in place. We need to get them all back in again so we can get rid of the bed blocking in the NHS. But aside from that, I'm going to go back to Jeremy.
Amen to that. Bravo.
Well, amen to that. I mean, we've got to start shouting about that. And all these people that want to sweep what they did to us under the carpet during lockdown and move on, we're never going to move on. We're never, ever going to forget what they've done, because, you know what, people are still dying because of what happened during lockdown. People are still suffering. Children are suffering. People are not in work. We've got hospitals overrun because they can't put people into care homes. And Jeremy Hunt was for all of that. And the biggest thing for me that Jeremy Hunt proves is that there's a complete disconnect between the public and what his thoughts are. He is one of the elitists. The reasons that the markets recovered so well when he was in is because these elitists don't want us to run the country that we live in. They don't want us to be in democracy, and we want to live in a democracy. That's what makes Britain great, that we have a democracy, that we have a say in who governs us. But this man doesn't want that. He feels that his view is greater than ours, and I really worry what will happen to Britain if he gets into power.
Well, yes, because we know about his position on lockdowns, and he's just as much of a net zero activist as well. And this is going to have big implications for the way we live our lives in the years to come.
Well, net zero is one of the reasons that we're in the mess we're in now. You know, if we just hadn't have gone for that policy and gone for everybody wants a better world. You know, I'm a complete environmentalist. You know, I hate the plastics that have polluted and how many
including those wretched masks.
Thank you very much. You took that. Billions of masks now in the sea, and all of those plastic gloves and all the plastic that we had to produce to pretend to put in between things. We know it was all wrong. We know it's wrong. Maybe if Jeremy stood up and said, I was completely wrong on COVID, I am completely wrong on net zero, let's find a way of moving forward that's best for the British public, then maybe we might think he might be the man for the job. But he's so arrogant, and he believes in a type of world that's dystopian to us as British people. We believe in our freedom.
Tanya, briefly, what does a politician's attitude towards lockdowns tell you about their character and about the kind of leader they are? Because you've got people like Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, who's very freedom-loving. Of course, we know about Sweden during the pandemic. But then you've also got Justin Trudeau and his total autocracy in Canada. So what do these attitudes to lockdowns tell us about our public figures, and why is it so important?
Well, they tell us everything we need to know about these public figures, don't they? That they don't believe that the people are able to govern themselves. We vote people in to serve us. We have not voted you in to tell us what to do, to tell us that we can't see our families or go out or behave in a human way to each other. What happened during lockdown was very, very telling. And all of those politicians that stood up against lockdown, there was a minority. They're the people that I would trust governing us now and should be in government now.
But also,
anybody who agreed with lockdown, it's dystopian and it's communist and it's not what we stand for as British.
And it smacks of poor judgment because they got it wrong, Tanya Buxton.
They got it wrong and they haven't apologised.
Show me a country in the world that didn't lock down, that didn't have mask and vaccine mandates, that's had a disproportionately high death toll from COVID. It does not exist.
Unfortunately, the disproportionate death toll is from lockdown, and we're seeing it more and more, and the numbers are going up and up and up as we can't continue now. So it says a lot about politicians of trust your people. Trust the people that voted you in. There is a complete disconnect now between the elitists and politics as a whole, actually, and the public. I was talking to young people today. I had a room full of musicians and they were all talking, but all of them were saying they don't want to vote anymore. This is what this has done to us.
Devastating. My thanks to the freedom-fighting broadcaster, the legend that is Tanya Buxton. Thanks, Tanya. We'll see you soon. Well, it's time now for this. Yes, it's time to reveal today's Greatest Britain and Union jackass. So let's get the Greatest Britain nominees from Nigel Nelson, Stanley Johnson and Belinda DeLucy. Nigel, who's caught your eye today?
Oh, well, Greatest Britain, I think, is Keir Starmer for the best joke.
I beg your pardon?
Was the best joke of the day when he says that in the Tory party, anyone can be Prime Minister for 15 minutes.
Not a bad line, I must say. I did think the ladies not for turning up was strong too. How about you, Stanley? Who's your Greatest Britain?
Well, my Greatest Britain is Hilary McGrady, who is the head of the National Trust, and she has been fighting to get another U-turn from this government, and that is to say we've got to stop this idea that the Tories are fighting a war on nature. We've got to make it clear that the Tories are pro-environment. They may even be pro-net zero, I can tell you. I certainly am. So bully for Victoria McGrady.
OK, and how about you, Belinda? Your Greatest Britain?
I'm going to nominate Penny Mordaunt today. Even though we disagree on serious issues, I have to give her credit. She stood her ground when faced with a cackle of arguing toddlers jeering at her today in Parliament. And she defended Liz, spoke about her courage, and also listed all the U-turns that Keir Starmer has done. And I thought she did a stellar job today.
Good.
OK, well, I'm going to give it to Hilary. That's right. I'm going to say Hilary McGrady, because we do want a clean environment. Net zero might be a bit much, but we've certainly got to look after the planet for the next generation. Good shout, Stanley. OK, Nigel, your union jackass.
Well, I hate to heap more pain on Liz Truss, but I think she was a bit of a jackass today for forcing Penny Mordaunt into the Commons to go and answer a question which is rightly the Prime Minister asked.
OK. How about you, Stanley, your jackass of the day?
Nicola Sturgeon for saying that she'll keep the Scottish pound or not, or will, or maybe. Anyway, total indecision.
OK, Belinda.
My honorary jackass is Joe, I'm Irish Biden, for sticking his beak into our business and commenting on gosh, that was a slip up. Truss's policy saying they were a mistake. He has no interest in the UK. He's never been a friend of ours, so he needs to keep his beak out of our business.
I've got to give it to Belinda for sleepy Joe Biden. Can I thank my brilliant panel tonight? It's been such a lively and provocative 2 hours. Many thanks to Nigel Nelson, Stanley Johnson and Belinda DeLucy. We'll do it all again tomorrow at 9. See you then. Headliners is next.
Good evening, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather updates. Turning a bit misty overnight, so a few fog patches likely, which could be fairly slow to clear tomorrow morning. But for most, tomorrow's going to be a dry and a bright day with some spells of sunshine. There are low pressure systems dominating, but one is moving away, and this one's only making slow progress in. So actually in between, most places becoming dry and clear overnight. Still a few showers this evening over northern parts of Scotland. We'll keep a few going over the Northern Isles.